class. This is our fourth lecture, our fourth week of our class. It's on pop culture and Christian theology. And today we're going to be looking at the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is culture. We're going to be looking at culture, our culture here in North America. Just like the elephant in the room, it is always present. You can deny it, you can ignore it, you can avoid it, but still the elephant is in the room, and you always have to deal with it in one way or another. So that's why I entitled the class about culture here in North America, the elephant in the room, and how we're going to deal with it. Before we go further, let's have a word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, thank you so much that the students can be alive and well. Dear Father, keep them from the COVID-19 pandemic, dear Father. May they be learning both in their speech pathology and in their dietitian practice and hospital administration to be a blessing for others, to learn about culture so they can use it as a benefit and a blessing to others and for themselves and for their families. And we pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, there's a debate about human nature, a basic debate, and just to encapsulate that, to make it brief, there was a French philosopher called Rousseau, and he lived during the age of reason, kind of the height of the Enlightenment, where it felt that rationality, science was going to gain the ascendancy, that all problems could be solved by science. And so I have a quote here. To Rousseau, it was this pearl of goodness that Rousseau sought to protect and develop in children by shielding them from the deforming effects of societal institutions. In Emile, Rousseau writes of the importance of giving a child freedom to grow without the intrusion of adults. So Rousseau writes this philosophical novel, which was popular at the day and is still today, where he basically teaches that the reason why people are messed up today in society is it is society's fault. People, when they're born, are basically good. And the reason they turn out bad is because of society, the parents, the schools, the institutions, the laws. All we have to do, according to Rousseau, is allow the child to grow up freely. Because he's already good, he will grow up freely, and from that then will come a good society, because children are basically good. So this is the view of human nature. It's a very positive view. It's a very, not a very influential view today, but it's still a view that people are born basically good. And the reason they become bad is because of the cultural parental influences that they grow up with. Now, in order to counter this view, someone made a movie. His name was Golding, and the name of the movie was The Lord of the Flies. And in The Lord of the Flies, a group of boys is shipwrecked on an island, and then they develop their own society. And according to this quotation about the film, but they can't get a toehold onto what Mr. Golding called his attempt to trace the defects of society back to the defects of human nature. So Golding holds the opposite view of Rousseau. He says, you know, I'm going to put these boys on an island. Yeah, they're not going to have a intervening culture around them. And my speculation that if this happens, you are still going to have the bullies. You are still going to have the boys that pick on the weaker kids. And so this whole film was to counter the positivism of Rousseau and others that say people grow up good, and culture is what makes them bad. Golding would say in The Lord of the Flies, look, you put a boys, even very young boys, on a island, and they're able to survive after several years. The same things that develop the bullying, the victimization, the oppression in boys who are bullied is still going to develop, because, as people say, boys will be boys. It was very interesting. I was reading recently about COVID-19 and education. And one of the principals, very proactively, she started to visit the students' homes to see how they were doing. And so this was from Hartford, Connecticut. Certainly no, how shall I say, benighted area of our country. A fairly wealthy area. And here's what the Associated Press article said. After a knock on his door, third grade student Jamie Lee emerged to see his school principal smiling at him from his doorstep. As they chatted, Principal Tyarisha Batchelor picked up on a clue to the question that brought her to the apartment, because apparently this boy wasn't fully engaged in his online learning. The boy was not looking up from a smartphone. Twice she asked what he was doing on it before he confirmed her suspicions. He was playing video games. So yeah, let boys to themselves without supervision, girls as well. I don't want to pick on the boys only, but in this particular instance, it was a boy. And yeah, instead of focusing on his schoolwork through his smartphone, he was focusing on his video games, and that's why his test scores, his interaction with the class was so low. So here you have an example again with Golding, Lord of the Flies. If a young boy or girl is just left to themselves all day, instead of being at school with their associates and with their teachers, what are they going to do? Well, in this particular instance, they are doing something non-constructive by playing video games instead of focusing on their schoolwork. Now, there is this also, as part of the debate about human nature, there's a debate about heredity and environment. How much does heredity have in shaping the individual, and how much does environment? I think the debate today, obviously, is that both have a role to play in the development of an individual. Who we are both comes from our parents and from how we are raised. I'd like to give just a brief illustration of this. Here we have a picture of a beautiful sunflower. And we know a sunflower, like other plants, it needs full sun in order to grow. I mean, that's in its nature. It needs full sun in order to grow and develop these beautiful sunflowers. So, it says very, very plainly, if you buy it from Lowe's or Home Depot, this plant needs full sun, because that is part of its DNA, that's part of its genetics. The plant needs full sun. Now, wonder if you would take that plant that needs full sun, and instead of following the directions, you plant it in a very shady, gloomy area. Well, it doesn't take a PhD to understand that if you put a sunflower under a shade tree and it gets very little sun during the day, that sunflower is not going to grow well. Why? Because the environment of the sunflower is not conducive to its growth. So there we see in a very simple illustration of the sunflower that environment does have a influence on the growth of the sunflower, as well as the sunflower itself. Its DNA demands full sun. And any of us who have been, I had two brothers and two sisters, and I can tell you we're all five of us were very, very different. And my mother, as well as my father, had to treat us different as we were growing up. I remember this one time, it was the summertime, and both my younger brother, Tommy, and I were looking for summer work. And my younger brother was 2 years younger than myself. So so we both found out that a garage that fixed cars and trucks, his name was Manuel Roach, and he had a rather large shop outside of our town, and we heard that he needed a mechanic. And so both my brother and I went over there to get interviewed for a summer job. Well, my Manuel Roach was very smart. He called my father, who also fixed cars for a living, and he said, which one should I hire for the summer to fix cars? And without hesitation, my father said, and correctly said, take the younger one. Um, and it's very true. You know, my brother turned out to be a fantastic mechanic. He went to school for it. He fixed these huge earth-moving machines. He could fix anything. I, on the other hand, can barely fix nothing. And so it shows that Tommy, my younger brother, was going to grow much better in an environment of fixing things than I would. I had another gift, more in the academic thought writing area than my younger brother Tommy. By the way, my younger brother Tommy, I used to say to him, Tommy, you are the smartest of the whole family. Even though I had far more academic education, I believe that Tommy, my younger brother, had far more native ability than I did as far as figuring out things. So what does the Bible say about fallen human nature, or what is the nature of man? The Bible is very clear. Psalms 51 verse 5 says, this is a psalm written by David as a response to his committing adultery with Bathsheba. He is in repentance. He's confessing before God. And one of the verses says, surely I was sinful at birth, sinful from the time my mother conceived me. So David is saying, I was born a sinner. You would know, oh God, that I was born a sinner. From the very moment of conception, I had evil propensities in me. Every person that was born after Adam and Eve, if you believe in that story of our first parents who sinned against God by eating the forbidden fruit, all their prosperity, all the people coming from them, we're going to be born with the same inclination to sin. As most of us know, it is far easier to do bad than it is to do good. To buy the pizza, to overindulge, to do all sorts of things that we know is not best for us. It's easier to do bad than it is to do good. I always remember I used to help people try to stop smoking. And, it's very interesting. You really don't know how hard it is to stop smoking until you try to stop smoking. Because when you're smoking, it's like going down the river. You're not going against the river, you're going with the river. And some people going with the river said, yeah, I can turn around anytime and stop. Well, as I try to help people stop smoking in groups, they would say after the first, second, or third day, I didn't know it, but this is the hardest thing I ever did. Why? Because when you try to go against something that is harmful to you, then you feel the strong current pulling against you. Romans 3:23 in the New Testament from the Apostle Paul says, since all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. He takes the first 3 chapters in his major work, basically arguing both the Jews and the Gentiles, both those who have the Bible and don't have the Bible, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. So the Bible clearly teaches that we're not born good. We are born with the propensity of sin. The Bible does not teach that we are born guilty. A baby who is born of a mother who has syphilis might be born blind. Well, he is not responsible for the blindness. His mother is. She is the one who has the syphilis because of asexual behavior. The baby is born blind because of the sin of his mother, but that does not make the baby guilty. The Bible does not teach the child is born guilty, but the child is born with the effects of sin and has to deal with it just like each one of us has to deal with it. So with this elephant in the room, obviously if people individually are born sinful, it makes sense then a group of people, whether it's a school, a family, a wider society, or the world, are also sinful. And there's basically three ways that we can deal with culture. One is avoidance. And this is the avoidance. This is like becoming a monk. And I was in Asian culture for 12 years and Buddhism. One aspect of Buddhism is to divorce yourself from the broader society, to live in a temple area, whether it's in the city or out in the country. In Thailand, for instance, they have, which 95% of the people are Buddhists. They have many, many temples, and that's where the monk lives, is in the temple. It's a sanctuary. It is a place away from the world. It is a safe place. In Korea, they tend to place their Buddhist temples up on the mountains. And so you're totally divorced from society. And they're out in the middle of nowhere because Buddhism seeks to withdraw from the world in order to gain a higher state of being. So that's one way you can deal with society. You can throw away your cell phone. You can move out in the middle of an Arizona desert, pitch your tent underneath a tree, and seek enlightenment like the Buddha did so many years ago. Another way to deal with culture is obviously the opposite, immersion. I am going to totally immerse myself in the culture. I know in my culture that I was acquainted with when I moved away from Catholic school and I attended a secular college. It was very funny. When I moved away from my parents' house when I was 19 and I was going to college, many of my friends were totally involved in the hippie culture, and they would go to school stoned, high on marijuana, and oftentimes you would smell marijuana coming out of the classrooms. But because of my Catholic culture, I always was taught that school was very important. And it never, I mean, I would not think of going to school stoned. I said, no, I'm not going to go to school stoned. Okay, on the weekends I'll get stoned, but I can't focus on what I'm going to be doing and getting stoned. It's like today when I play golf. So often, yeah, to me golf is a serious game, and I enjoy playing it. But I see many guys when they come by in their carts. You know, they're already on their third or fourth beer, and you know, that's fine if you want to have kind of a you know, a relaxing time and a social time. But in my mind, it's golf time, and I have to be at my A game in order to hit the ball the best I can possibly be. So whether we like it or not, all of us are somewhat immersed in the culture we are a part of, either fully immersed or partly immersed. And the third, which is the biblical point of view, is that there's going to be a transformation. Psalms 51:10 says, "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and put a new and right spirit within me." And I talked about in my own conversion experience how God, through his miracle, had me live off drinking and smoking and taking drugs, meat, and drinking coffee. And he did that so my mind could clear. And all of a sudden, I found myself avoiding those things, avoiding people that were doing those things, and it led my life in an entirely different direction. And God was transforming my life so then he could put me back in culture in order to be also a transforming agent. So people, for instance, who were smoking in my 5-day plans, I could say, yeah, I used to smoke Camels cigarettes, 2 packs a day, but I'm here to help you go through some physical, mental, social, spiritual ideas to help you stop smoking. And that's really the purpose of what the Bible is teaching. Yes, we are born sinners, but God wants to transform us in order to put us back into the culture so that just as we have been transformed from our bad habits, we are able to be put back in the culture and be transformative agents as well. I have a little short article from a fairly well-known Christian author named John Piper, "The Renewed Mind and How to Have It." So this talks about how culture, here it says in Romans 12:1 and 2, "Do not conform to the patterns of this world," that is this world's culture, "but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." So instead of being conforming to culture, we are transformed through God. We adopt the heavenly culture, and then we're able to go back and transform the culture around us. That is the biblical ideal. Next week, we are going to be looking at movies that moves minds. And so we're going to be looking at movies and then music, social media, the COVID-19. Every week, we're going to take a major look at how culture tends to move minds, and certainly movies. And I'm talking about anything you can get from going to the movie, Netflix, what's on your cell phone, any type of visual, YouTube, TikTok, although we're going to talk about that more in social media. How movies moves your minds are very powerful. And people today go to YouTube, other places in order to gain information. And so we're going to be looking at and I really have to apologize. I am not up on the current movies, but I will try to be relevant and talk about it in a way that you can see that even with most movies, there are Christian themes in the movie that we can appreciate. And in fact, the deeper the Christian themes that are in the movies, the more the people tend to appreciate them, and I think are also benefited from them. So I will see you this Monday night, and we'll talk about this whole area of a culture, the elephant in the room, and have discussion about that. And I really wish you a great week. Remember to keep up on your writing assignments and up on your reading. I don't tend to overload you. This is about the weekly load that you can expect going forward. And I'm hoping to see you Monday night at 7 o'clock, and God bless.